speaking at Gautam Auditorium. She is the co-producer of Transparent, which we've been watching last week, so she's pretty cool. She's going to do some movie screenings, and then she's going to join us for LGBTQ family dinner at Atlanta, which will be catered by Rig. Wednesday is Asexual Awareness Day, so we'll be tabling the coop if you want to find out more about asexuality, if you want to ask questions. That's a great time, besides any other time you want to come to the center and talk to the intern. And wear purple in support. If you can, that would be a great thing to do. Thursday at 11:30 in the center, there will be a brown bag entitled Violent Femmes, Reflections on the Makings of Bird Sweets. There's a few of these little cards around, but they're kind of a dance troupe that's going to be here, so that's cool. And Saturday, there's a pleasure party for Tanaklis. There's not a play about sex. The cast and friends and anyone who wants is welcome to come down to Bunch House from 9 to 11. There'll be an open party, called Sexuality, good time, great space. And then at 11, we'll all be heading across to the BSU event in Parker Commons. Pack, not Bunch. Thank you. And then last but not least, tonight at 6:30 there will be an event on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict at 6:30 it's right here. Okay, cool, that's Women's Studies. And dinner is provided at that as well. So lots of events this week. Regular instructions, if you need to leave, of course, we're understanding you have your 1220s, so just do so quietly and discreetly if possible, and clean up your trash around you. The bins at the back, the compost is in the left-hand bin as you're facing the bins. So put food only in there, and on the right-hand side you put all your plates and other like trash waste. Because even though the plates say they're recyclable, they just break down faster. They're not actually biodegradable. I'm an environmental studies major too. So, thank you all for coming again. As I said, today's brown bag is the Coming Out Stories brown bag, and so we're going to be talking about, we have queer people of color up here, as you can see. We have 5 individuals who will introduce themselves shortly, and we're going to be talking about what is coming out and how do different identities intersect with LGBTQ identities and coming out, and hopefully complicating the narrative of coming out a little bit. So I'm going to pass you on to our speakers.
Can everyone hear me if I'm not using the microphone? Hi everyone, hope you all are staying warm in this our weather. My name is Huang. I'm a junior, class of 2017. I'm from China, northeast of China, a corner northeast peninsula, seaside city, really beautiful. And I'm IR and mathematical econ double major, FYI. Yeah, that's it.
Hi, I'm Shyenne. Sophomore. That's the easiest part to get out of the way. I am an English major, and so I have lots of papers. I want to talk about it. I am a Trinidadian American, and I am obviously queer, which is why I'm sitting here.
Hi, I'm Romelia Loaiza from California. I'm from Richmond, California, which is predominantly an immigrant community. I'm also from a Mexican-American background, and I identify as queer.
So almost very similar to Romelia. My name is Federico Elizondo. I am a junior. I'm a psychology and sociology double major. I come from an ethnic enclave in Laredo, Texas, so it's like 96% Hispanic. And I do identify myself as a queer Latino.
Hi, I'm Gautam Bhagat. I'm a senior, poli-sci major. I'm from New York City. My parents are from India, but I was born in New York. And yeah, I'm gay too.
Okay, well, thank you for introducing yourself. So, the kind of first broad area, which should not be a surprise to you all, so you can just kind of take it as you will, whoever wants to popcorn thoughts and work off each other. what are your thoughts about being a queer person of color? Are there certain parts of yourself that are highlighted or discomforted in different situations? How do you feel with your international identity, with your race identity? If you've studied abroad, has that affected it? And, basically, is there a relationship between different parts of your identities? And, what is it?
Okay. Well, I was born in China, and it is like a huge, and I'm the only child in my family from both my dad's part and my mom's part, like the only grandchild. And in China, there's like those traditional thoughts about like generations. And besides, I'm like the only grandchild, only son, and then branches out the whole family thing. That is kind of like, I consider that as one of my identities, as like the only child in my family, which gives me, I think before it gives me still like a little bit pressure about how I'm gonna deal with the situations when one day I'm like economically independent, I have my own life, how I'm going to respond, to my parents about that. Well, for me, I came out to my mom during high school, second year in high school. And it was during summer, and it was pretty casual. I was in my bedroom trying to sleep, and I couldn't. And at that time, I had my first boyfriend back in high school, so I couldn't fall asleep. So I walked into the living room. My mom was watching TV, and I just quietly sat beside her, and that just happened. My mom was really calm, and like there was no reactions. I couldn't see any reactions from her face, which is really scared because I don't know how she's digesting this piece of information. And we never talked about it. And then the next summer, I'm off to the United States, away from home. And the next time we talk about it is when she actually called me the end of first semester here at Colgate, right before finals week. I was going back home for Christmas. I don't know why I remember all this really clearly, but I was in Cooley studying for my finals, and my phone like buzzed, and it's my mom. Like, it has to be something that she will call me from China. So I picked up a call outside Cooley. She was just like, how are you doing these days, blah, blah, blah. I'm gonna see you like in a few days back home. And she mentioned one of my high school classmates' mom called her the other day, just, talking about both of their kids abroad, how is your son doing, blah, blah, blah. And I came out to my high school classmates after I came to the United States. Like, we have like a little chat group thing. So her mom was talking to my mom is that how often did you catch up with your son? Like, he is abroad, you need to video chat him more often. So the situation between my mom and I is like, she told me before I go abroad, come here, if you have something to talk about or like you need ask for help, let me know. Like, I wouldn't bust you like during normal life or whatever. So my high school classmate's mom told her that I joined some kind of like club at college, which I told my friends I joined Lambda here at Colgate. And my friend didn't tell her mom that it's like for LGBT community. They were just chatting about like joining club organizations at school. And my friend's mom was like, you need to talk to your son more often. Like, this world is like, there are bad people around, and like, be sure that your son joined the right clubs and organizations, blah, blah, blah. And my mom got really mad at her because she doesn't want other parents to be pointed at like what she's doing with me. So she called me, and I suddenly know that she's referring to what, like, I joined Lambda. So I explained to her what it is. And then we started a conversation about it. She asked me how I'm doing. I said, I'm feeling real, I'm feeling much less burden on my shoulders after I came out here to Colgate. I came out at Colgate during the group chat thing after company during first year orientation. So it was like I have nothing on me after the orientation thing. I was like, it's me, and like I feel comfortable and happy under this environment. I can, it becomes much easier when you actually speak something out, and then you just focus on your daily life. You write your papers, you prepare for a quiz instead of thinking about, oh, I'm still in the closet, I'm not out, which for me is like much easier. So I explained to her, and then she asked me what is my plan, like, do you want to tell your dad or something? So I told her that I wouldn't tell my dad until I find someone that is really like, it sounds so cheesy, like a significant other. At first, like, I don't know how my dad will react if I actually tell him. I still don't know because I haven't told him yet. And I don't want to make assumptions, and I have a piece of myself inside that is worried that if he got really mad at me and like tell me that come back home or whatever, but I don't think that it will be that extreme, but just in case that he will still fall for my college tuition, so I think I will tell him after I'm economic independent. I don't know if I sound very selfish about that or not, but that's the real situation, I think. But I don't know if my mom told him or not. I don't know. I don't sense anything when I'm back home. So we talked it through, and then and I'm glad that we talk about it because that's the first time we actually discuss it. Yeah, things. Yeah, and that's kind of my came out story.
My coming out story is like not nearly as like grand. It's like really solemn. Actually, it's like at 3 a.m. and I'm like, man, like I really have to do this because I've already told one of my friends, and I'm like, oh yeah, like, but like my family is like very traditional. Like they're from Trinidad, and like in Trinidad, it's like a no-no. Like that just doesn't happen. If it happens, keep it to yourself. So I'm like, but my mother has this clause, and it's like, so what happened is when I was really little, she was like, hey, like, if no matter what, you continue your education, I like take care of it. So like, if you end up pregnant, like at a really young age, it's fine. Like, I'll take the child, you continue through school. I was like, okay, so that's sort of an unconditional love statement. So, like, it's not nearly like as life-changing as teen pregnancy if you think about it. So like, at maybe like, my mother and I have this clause that like at midnight we part our separate ways and we don't speak anymore because like we need time away from each other even while we're in the same room. And so I turned to her at like maybe 2 a.m. and I'm like, hey, and she's like, it's past midnight. And I'm like, I know, but like, listen, like this is really important to me. And she's like, it's still past midnight. And I'm like, okay, but I like girls, and I like continue, like, I'm like, all right, so I'm gonna get ready for bed. She goes, so wait, you stopped me past midnight to tell me this? Okay. And I was like, all right, love you. Love you too, don't ever do that again. And I was like, but my mother has this really bad habit. I was like planning to tell people like when I felt like it. My mom has this really bad habit of like, I share something with her and she accidentally shares it with everyone else. So I was like, she calls me one day and she's like, oh, did you know your stepfather was really upset you didn't tell him? Tell him what? Tell him what, Mom? She goes, well, that you have a girlfriend and that you like girls and... Okay. See, that's weird, because I didn't know he knew, because I didn't tell him. So, I'm wondering who... You know what, he asked, and I couldn't figure out how to avoid the situation. How about, that's not really my information to impart. How about you ask her? How about you ask her? I have my phone on me, Mom. But that's not the point. The point is that ever since then it's been interesting because like my mother's always been the black sheep of the family, so she dealt with it well because I'm the new black sheep of the family. But like with other family members it's interesting, especially since like my family is really like I'm the first generation like of American in my family, so like my family's like, oh, that's so interesting. So, or I get texts like, oh, so you have a boyfriend, and I'm like, ha ha ha. But like it's an interesting adjustment period because I don't feel like it in essence defines me. More like gives me another lens to look through it. Like I am a person of color. I identify as Afro-Latina. So like that plus like just being queer is like a really interesting dynamic, and it's like, oh great, like now I have multiple boxes to check off on forms and things like that. But it's also a really interesting thing because it adds like dimension to my experience.
Okay, so I have a lot of thoughts, and let me try to like keep them in order. I have papers, yeah. But I don't know. It's for me like coming out. I don't like that term, and I'll get into that later. Is like a new thing. Like I went all through high school fully believing, like with my entire heart, I was straight, and I wasn't. And then I didn't like realize that till before I started my freshman year when I was here, and I was part of the summer institute with OUS, and we had a safe zone, and there was step in, step out, and they asked the question like, have you ever been attracted to someone of the same sex? And I was just like, I like found myself stepping in. I was like, wait, what am I doing? Why am I stepping in? What's going on? And then like the safe zone ended, and then I went to my room and had a panic attack because I was like too dramatic. But like I didn't really do anything with it after that. And then all of freshman year, like I kind of like it was on my mind, but it didn't like I was just like, oh, it's whatever. And then sophomore year was kind of when I really started thinking about identity and like what it meant that I was queer, because like I said, I grew up in a Mexican American family. They were Catholic. I grew up in an immigrant community, and just like all those things were like really like on my mind because I've never seen like a same-sex couple or a queer couple that wasn't white. Like they were always on TV and they were always white, and I was just like, no one in my family, none of my friends. I had a biology teacher who in high school who identified as lesbian, had a wife, but she was also white, so it was like she couldn't understand the whole part of me like dealing with the fact that my family was, well, parts of my family, some of them aren't, some of them are, they're religious, that they're Mexican, and just like how like I grew up seeing like my father, I don't talk to him now, but like I have this like very distinct memory from like middle school, it wasn't that long ago, where Prop 8 was on the ballot in California, and he said like, oh, I'm not gonna they like the gays, or he said some slur, I don't remember exactly what, shouldn't get married because it's against the Bible. And I kind of just like stopped. I was like, I've never heard you quote the Bible until this moment, so why are you doing it now? Like, actually, funny story, when I was 8, I had my communion, and I was like actually terrified that the church was gonna burn down if my father set foot in it. Like, because I never like associated him with religion. Like, I thought he was really like mad at like God or something. And then but like even going back to like communion, I had catechism where I had classes where I learned all the prayers and I learned the Bible stories, and then like we also had like a role play where I had to pretend to be the wife of like a man, or like my friend who was like maybe a year older than me, and I just remember sitting there thinking, I don't want to be his wife. Why do I have to? And then just like, cause like my family, like women are expected to cook, to clean, to be domestic, to take care of children, and then I've never fully fit into that. Like, I've never liked cooking. I've never really liked cleaning. Who really does like cleaning? If you do, good for you. But I hate it. And just like, and so, but they also gave me the space where they didn't force me to do those things, where they didn't force me to learn. But then as I got older, I was expected to start feeling this like domestic role and this idea of what a woman was, and that's not what my interests were. And so like it turned into like my sisters and my mom and like my like family members like always making comments about like, oh, she's not going to do that, just like about kind of their idea of what womanhood was and how I didn't do it. And then that complicates it more when like I identify as queer, so like I'm like, it's fluid. It's not just like men, women, one gender, two genders. It's not like that. But for my family, like what they'll see it as is they read it as bisexual, which is not what I identify as. And then how they read bisexual is that I'm either lying about being a lesbian or I'm just experimenting and waiting until I find the right man. And so, and I'm still gonna go back to that, like, that idea of what a woman is, and it's not me. And then just like, even just like to racialize it, like my family, a lot of them, like on my mom's side mostly, that we're all really white presenting. And so I never have to deal with like colorism or racism within the LGBTQ community, which is a real thing, because I present as white. People see me as like one of them. And then I also never like, but then with like my father's side, that's where we have like more of the morenos or the darker like skin like family members. And just even my grandma, my abuela, I call her abuela spooky because as a child they told me that to get me to be good, they told me she was a witch, and if I was bad, she was it was funny. My sisters were mean to me. But yeah, like just seeing her, like she's this very elderly Mexican woman, like she was raised in Mexico, and she like, not to say she doesn't love her grandchildren, but she has these biases and like she can't necessarily control them. And so like even with my sister Erica, who is like in a long-term relationship with an African American man, like when my grandma heard that she was in a relationship, the first thing out her mouth was, "Is he black?" So I can only imagine going to her and being like, "Abuela, I like women," and she's gonna be like, "What?" Oh no. But and so like the idea of the closet or coming out, I really don't like it, because not everyone has the privilege of coming out. Not everyone has a safe environment, and not everyone is ready. And so like yesterday, the speaker Kat Connell, she actually like spoke about a lot of what I was thinking, and she like had this term, the glass closet, which is where, if I had to assign a term, that's where I'm at. Where like I'm out here at Colgate, but I'm not necessarily, and like in other spaces, but I'm not necessarily out at home. I think that it's only like my sisters and a few of my friends know, and that wasn't even my choice. Like so other people made the decision, like they forced me to come out. And it's some days I'm like, okay, that's probably good, but then other days I get really angry. I'm like, that's not right, because I'm still, there's this narrative that when you come out, it's like really great, and it's like sometimes it goes in here like 100% gay and like and proud, but it's not true. Like there's a lot of identity work, and there's a lot of back and forth that goes with it. And so like my friend, she knew, and I was on a road trip with her and my sisters across the country, and she told my sisters when we were in Arizona, and like I was trapped in the car and I couldn't escape the conversation. And so, it wasn't a bad conversation, it wasn't something I was ready to have. And they were, more or less supportive, but they also assigned, a sexuality to me, and they said, "Oh, so you're bisexual." And I just went along with it, because, sometimes it's too exhausting to try to educate people and try to, explain that sexuality is more fluid than that, it's not so strict. And then, and I guess bisexuality is kind of the middle ground, but it's still there's so much more. And so, but after that it kind of just got ignored, And I think one of my, no, you probably don't know, so let me explain it, but one of my biggest fears with coming out, especially with my family and my friends back home, because a lot of them are very liberal, they're very, like, they would be okay with it, I guess, but then also my identity, I would also only be reduced to my sexual identity, which is not what I want, because I'm so much more than that. Like, I'm Mexican American, I'm queer, I'm a feminist, I'm like a daughter, I'm a sister, I love coloring, I love watching Doc McStuffins. It's like, I'm like actually a child, but that's something I don't want. I don't want to be this one thing that's like something that's so new to me, and I'm still really trying to figure it out. That was long rant.
Yeah, so I guess my take on these questions are more grounded on like how I like conceptualize my identity myself. So it's really interesting because, so again, I came from Texas. It was a border city, very conservative, like highly religious family, and so I was that sort of person where it was like hashtag all lives matter, like why do gay people need to come out, like why, like, you know, so it was very different from who I am now. And so when I got to Colgate, I was sort of like, I don't know, so when I think about, so I came to terms with my racial identity before I came to terms with my sexual identity, and so I got to Colgate and it was sort of like, oh, like, what are you? And I was like, good question, like, what am I, you know, because I had always seen myself as like without a race because I lived in a like community where I was part of the dominant race, and so it was never something that crossed my mind. So when I got to Colgate, people were just like, oh, like, where are you from? Like, what are you? And I was like, Hispanic, Latino, like, there were so many words that, like, I didn't even know how to actually go about it, and it was sort of like I felt like I had to take courses here at Colgate to sort of, like, see, like, what the Latino experience is, like, how should I identify, you know, like, what, like, is Hispanic okay, is that problematic, like, Latino, you know, like, I just don't know what the difference is, you know, so I slowly came to, like, understand myself as Latino before I did so, and it was something that was sort of, like, imposed onto me. Whereas my sexual identity, I guess, a lot of the discourse I heard growing up was more so like, oh, sexuality is like a choice, you know? So it was something that contrasted from being Latino, because being Latino, people would make that decision for me, and they were like, oh, well, like, you're not white, or like, you're some sort of like Latino, you know? And so it was something that I like was sort of like forced to like accept, you know? But with my sexual identity, because there was this discourse on like choice, you know, like you're choosing this way. So it was like, oh, like, after recognizing myself as a Latino, I was like, well, like, do I want another marginalized identity? I was like, nah, you know, so it was sort of like, it was just something that I, like, didn't want to, like, face, because I had seen it as a choice, because that was sort of, like, the way I always heard it, you know, and then I realized that, I don't know, so then it got to the point where I was like, okay, well, like, I kissed a guy, so, like, what does that mean, you know, and then I had a lot of trouble, like, just, you know, I was sort of, I think I had to come out to myself first, again, like, sort of, like, again, I had to accept, like, my, like, racial identity, and then I started seeing my queer identity as something, like, also, like, almost, like, innate, you know, like, not necessarily a choice that I was making, so that was a whole different process. And I think when it comes to, like, identifying under, like, I don't know, when it comes to, like, like acknowledging yourself, I was sort of like, oh, well, like, I don't know, like, I just know I'm not straight, but, like, you know, like, I don't know how else to put it. And then again, I felt like, as Romelia was saying, that you sort of like have this like academic discourse available sometimes, and that becomes like a privilege, you know. So I think in that regard, I've been able to like take classes to sort of figure out how I identify, you know, and now I feel perfectly comfortable like identifying as queer. And to me, like, you know, I was like, you know, I don't even know the whole deal with queer. It's like, I know there's like some issue, but I was like, what is that issue, you know? Like, I don't know, like, why don't people just say like gay or like lesbian, you know? And then I started to realize that, you know, as I came to like understand the academic like discourse on the word queer, I like really fell in love with it. And I love the word queer because it's more so, like, part of it, like, I like to identify as queer because part of it is, yes, like, it's indicative of my sexuality, my sexual orientation, but at the same way, it's also like like a political resistance, you know, and I think I really love that about it, where it's like, you know what, oh, I know, see, like, I forget that the word queer, like, is not, like, normal, like, it's not, like, common, like, terminology, so, like, the way I personally identify, like, define queer is sort of like resisting normative sexuality and normative gender, you know, and so, like, in that regard, I don't think, like, we should have a normative, like, anything, you know, and so, like, for me to sort of identify myself as queer is, like, in one regard, it is sort of acknowledging my sexuality, but in another regard, it's acknowledging, like, my, like, this resistance that I have to the way the world is so obsessed with, like, categorizing things, and so I think that word encapsulates me very well. And then in terms of, like, you know, where I feel most comfortable and, like, uncomfortable, it's really difficult because having that, like, queer person of color, like, identity is, like, in some spaces I feel validated as, like, a queer, like, student, you know, as a queer person. But then in other spaces, I feel validated as a, like, Latino. And it's sometimes, like, exclusive, you know, it's very rare where I find those spaces where I'm like, oh yeah, like I feel both my identities validated in this space, you know, and so it's really interesting to see that, like, sometimes I have to make choices, you know, like, do I want to go to a space where I'm acknowledged as, like, a queer individual, or do I want to go to a space where I'm acknowledged as a Latino? And so it's very difficult, but I think in terms of, like, how do they inform each other, I love that about it because I can articulate to people who are, like, Latino, like, in some ways, like, with the whole, like, intersectionality, I can articulate, like, the experience of being queer. Like, they have some sort of, like, understanding I can go off of. So although they may not fully understand my queer identity, or vice versa, they may not fully understand my Latino identity, it's really interesting how the intersectionality between both of them is similar. So it provides, like, a framework where I'm able to inform others on, like, the opposite, like, on, like, my sexuality or my race. Yeah.
So I think that the term, you know, coming out story is kind of difficult, just because when you come out so many times in your life, there's not just one story that you have. So I think, like, my most, like, significant coming out story was to my fraternity sophomore year, and that was very much like a week after I came out to my parents and to my family. So it was very much all one really fast thing. I came out to myself the end of freshman year, kind of. I think, you know, all my friends were bragging about the girls that they were hooking up with, and, you know, how much fun they were having, and I kind of had to make all these excuses as to why I wasn't hooking up with girls, which was kind of awkward. But I think that I came back for sophomore year, and, you know, something in me just cracked, and I realized, like, wow, like, you know, I'm kind of living this line, you know, I'm a very different person inside, and I'm a very frank, blunt person for those who know me, so, I mean, I just kind of have to come out and say it. So, I mean, I told my parents, I told my sister, and I joined the fraternity in about, you know, mid-September of sophomore year, and very early into the new member period, which is when you're not really initiated, but you're getting to know your pledge class, you're getting to know the house. There was a night where, you know, all 25 of us boys, as new members, were sat down, and it was just us, and we were given a chance just to explain things about ourselves that we haven't really told other people before. So people really got into it as, you know, the night went on, and people talked about all sorts of sad, you know, emotional things that, you know, boys don't really open up to, because there is that stereotype that boys are less emotional. And I think that was just the time for me to be like, you know what, like, I have to do this. And I actually really didn't know many people in my pledge class when I joined. I joined with, you know, with my two best friends. So I was really being upfront and new to people that I'd never really spoken to freshman year. And kind of like this, they're all sitting in a circle, and I was like, guys, like, I just wanted to share that, you know, I am gay, and this is it's a very new thing for me. And I'm, you know, ready to be your brother if you guys are ready to be mine. And if this is an issue, like, I'm happy to leave. I just want us to all be comfortable together. And the response was actually a lot better than I thought. I think without even a moment's silence, every single person got up and individually hugged me. They said that they were so proud of me, that you know, they'd never known somebody so brave, and there's so many guts to come out to, you know, such, like, virile, manly men in that presence. And I think that was probably the most, like, comforting aspect for me. I think that moving forward, like, over the last 2 years, there have been some good days and there have been some bad days, you know, as there is with like, anything. You know, I hear the word fag, like, every day. And people sometimes forget that it's an offensive word to some people. So I think in that sense, it's been really nice for me to be around these 24 or 60 something boys also, because a lot of them come from small suburban white towns that don't really have many out gay people in those communities. I think in terms of my pledge class, most of them didn't ever really know or were close friends with somebody who was gay. So I think it's been a really nice opportunity for them. It's also been a great opportunity for me, the character building experience. I think on top of that, it gets a little difficult sometimes because I feel like certain parts to, I don't really get full expression of myself in my fraternity at times, only because I think that, my sexuality, my cultural identity, those don't really match up with the norms of my house. So while everyone's talking about, all the girls that they had sex with the night before, I don't really ever get to celebrate my sexuality in that same way because there's nobody else kind of operating from that same frame of reference. So that definitely has been kind of hard. And I think what's also difficult sometimes is that, there's a lot of hypermasculinity in my house, where, you always have to prove to others and to yourself that you are a man. And I think that in my house, there's a very one rigid definition of what it is to be a man. And it's kind of difficult for me sometimes to place myself within that broader framework where, I don't like girls, and I don't love sports, and I don't, drink heavily like they do. So it kind of leads me to question, what it means to be a man. And I hope that what I've done for them is, shown them that being a man is so much more than just, what they think it's going to be like. In terms of the whole, being of color aspect, I think that because I come from a very sort of, I went to a private school. I'm from Manhattan. I've been in touch with a lot of white people, so I kind of integrated kind of easily, but that doesn't mean that it's still not hard. I think in terms of coming out, my coming out story in terms of my fraternity was amazing, but that's in America. I think that in India, the whole idea of coming out is very different. I think in America, the whole idea of coming out, to some people, or the stereotype is where it's a very celebratory experience where you kind of learn to appreciate your identity and you learn who you are, and it's a very positive thing. But I think in India, the whole idea around being gay is still very taboo. People don't really talk about it. Coming out isn't really a thing. Gay people aren't really a thing. So that's kind of a challenge for me down the road because my family has been very, very, very supportive. They're kind of liberal. They've lived in America for 30 years now. But I think going down the road, it's been very difficult for me to come out to my grandparents and to my cousins and to my aunts and uncles who I'm very close with, because there are a lot of generational and cultural gaps at play there that might make it a little more difficult than, even coming out to 25 fraternity boys. So, yeah.
Cool, thanks. That was awesome. So this is a great moment if you want to slip out at 12:10 here. I'm just going to ask one more question that one or two or all of you can respond to. I think some of you already touched on the issues, and then we will open up for any other questions from the crowd. So among a lot of what you all said, there was a lot of this talking about this narrative of what it means to come out, and the pressure almost to come out from external society, and then also from LGBTQ community. And so I just wonder if any of you have any comments on this narrative of coming out. Is it necessary, and then how does it relate to, and I don't know if y'all want to define this, I'm sure Rolo can, I'm sure others of you can, the ideas of homonormativity.
Okay. Someone define.
I have like a somewhat of an understanding from it, I can correct me.
We can work on it.
So I guess I'm gonna try and break it down for you. So homonormativity, so homo, which is like homo, like refers to like homosexual, and then normativity, like something that's like standard or like typical, like a typical way of being. And so when you put them together, it's like the way homosexuals, like a normative way for homosexuals to behave. So like in that regard, when you're talking about like, there's this like image of when you think of like homonormativity, and you see it as like, oh well, like this is the only way you can perform like being a homosexual, you know, and that often ignores the intersectionalities between like class, gender, and race. And so you know, when you think of like a gay male, you think like, oh, okay, well, like flamboyant, you think like white, you think like very like expressive, like more on the feminine side. And so like in that regard, it narrowly defines what homosexuality is, and it ignores all these other intersectional identities like class, race, and gender. So I don't know if that was. Yeah, and so what was the question?
Yeah.
So, I don't know, how does this pressure to come out fit into that narrative of what homonormativity should be, or like comments on homonormativity in your coming out and what you should be after you come out?
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay, so I guess like for my experience, it was always, so it was, again, I came from like a community where my values were more like communalistic, like more collectivistic values. And so I think while I'm here at Colgate, it's very like individualistic, like everybody's doing their own thing. Like the American culture tends to be more like individualistic, you know, just like you do you and like screw everybody else. Or not like necessarily screw everybody, but like put yourself on top, you know, like you matter more than anybody. And it's very different from where I come from, where it's sort of like, oh, you know, like I'm the youngest of 6, you know, and like I've always like the Mexican culture, I would say, is more like, oh, like do everything like for others, you know. And so it's sort of like when I'm like, oh, do I want to acknowledge this like queer identity, which I know is gonna like disappoint my family? It's sort of like, no, like I don't know, it gets very difficult. And I feel like in terms of like homonormativity, was something that when I decided to come out, it was very like, I don't know, it was not necessarily like I don't think I would say it was very like homonormative, because I think there's this expectation where when you come out with like a significant other, you know, and that was something that like I didn't have. And it was like, do I still like, can my family like conceptualize what I'm saying, even though I don't have like somebody like there, you know, to like come out with and be like, hey, you know, mom, dad, like I'm talking to this guy, or like this is my boyfriend, you know. It's sort of like very independent. And I think that was just one way where to like went against like homonormativity. But also I think for me it was more so this like coming out narrative. Like it's not like I don't want like my sexual identity to be the only thing that matters, you know. And so like when I came out to my family, it was not only like hey, you know what, like I'm not straight, like hey, you know what, like I have a like I think sexuality is fluid and not like a binary, you know. And then like it was more so like a personal stance that I was taking when I was coming out, because again, there's this like, I think like part of the homonormativity is like having like individualistic values, you know, like you need to be out and proud, and to be out and proud you need to like disregard what other people think, because unfortunately like the context in which we live in is like frowned upon to be like LGBTQ. And so like you need like I would argue that you need that like individualistic values to be like, you know what, like I'm gonna do me regardless of what any of you say, you know. And so like when I have this like value system where it's like, you know, I've learned to take into consideration what other people say, but like to acknowledge my queer identity, I have to say, you know what, like I can't acknowledge this identity while at the same time considering your opinions of me, because your opinions of me don't want me to be like queer, you know. And so in that regard, I have to like make a decision. Like it becomes like, I don't know, like, and for me to be open and proud about my like homosexual identity, I have to go against like my own values. And it's really difficult for me to like, you know, come to terms with that, but also for like my family and, you know, my friends, and they like, I always get like the just for like, oh, you're being selfish, like, oh, like why does it matter, you know. And so it's really interesting to see like how this like, how something like values play out so much in like homonormativity as well.
Oh yeah.
I think coming out's really interesting. I came out with my second girlfriend, like, but there was no real pressure. It became like a me thing, like, and not like an external thing. So like I felt it was right. I felt like at that point it was, I think, my senior year of like my junior senior year of high school, and I was like, I'm leaving for college soon. I technically don't have to deal with this, so like it was easier. But I think like it all depends on you, because like for a long time I was like, I just live my life, so like no matter who it's with, no matter, so it's like a mental thing. Like if you feel like without coming out that you're perfectly okay with that, then like by all means. Like for me, coming out is more like a you resolving any conflicts or like any discrepancies that you have with other people. Like it's more like a smoothing out of things. So like there are tons of people that don't come out and they're like, if you would ask, I would have told you. And like that's actually how I operate. So I'm like, you will never see me with a girlfriend on this campus. So like if you don't ask, you won't. But like you should ask me about any of my identifiers. Like it's just as fair to be like, oh, like how do you identify gender-wise? Is how do you identify like racially, like ethnically, like how do you identify class-wise? If you want to know me, you should probably ask that question. But like, so like I've never felt the need to get out on the quad and shout like, I am Afro-Latina. So like I've never felt the similar urge to shout that I am gay and I like women. That was never a thing. But I don't know. For me, it's like it's not necessary if you're comfortable. Like I think in terms of like living, like the aim is to be comfortable. For my family, I know it's really fun to my mom, because now my mom gets to walk by and be like I have forms to fill out, and she gets to be like, aren't you a statistic booster? She like walks by and she's like, make sure to add that you have ADHD, that you're lesbian, that you're a person of color, that you're Latina, that you're of like lower income, and that you're like, I'm like, okay mom, thanks. And she's like, you're a great candidate. And like, my mother basically sees it as like way to get Colgate to pay my tuition. So like, she's really excited about that. But like, for me, it's like a personal thing. Like I've never felt the need to be like if I want to know if you like women or you like men, like I'll be sure to like try to find a way to slide that question into your life. Like there's like, it's really not that like, I'm not gonna ask you to announce it. I'm never gonna ask you if you have announced it. It's literally like, and chances are it doesn't come up in our day-to-day conversations. Like I'm not like, so have you found a girlfriend or boyfriend or a significant other with you? So like, chances are it's like not necessary. If you see yourself as a being like beyond that, then coming out, like for me, is like as long as you're okay with who you are and like what that stands for, or you're fighting to figure out who that is, like then that's your own coming out process. It doesn't need to be announced.
Cool. So Rolo's gonna respond quickly, and then anyone who has questions.
I've been like, I think homonormativity can play into the heteronormative like thought a lot, because, and that's like a fallback from having marriage as the forefront of all like LGBT rights for so long. And so the idea of homonormativity is like a lot like you're supposed to find someone, you're supposed to like live in the city for a little bit, then you're gonna like move to the suburbs with your white picket fence and your cute little sweaters and like children, and like, and that's good because that's what some people want. That's not the whole story. That's like such a small section of it. And so like and that plays into coming out. Like you come out and then all this wonderful stuff starts to happen to you, and that's not always the case, and then for some people it is, and that's like wonderful. And then just like what Federico was saying about community, like yes, I'm an individual, but I'm also a part of a larger community. I'm a part of my like family, my home community. And so if I come out, it's not just me coming out to like my mom or my sisters, like I'm coming out to the entire family. It's not like I have that one aunt who lives like in some other state and I send her a Christmas card. Like I have a large family and we see each other all the time. Like I think a little too much sometimes. But in like part of that family like means that there's some really homophobic people in there, and so it's just like I'm not just coming out to my mom, I'm coming out to everyone, and there's like something going on within my generation of cousins, because like there's like three or four like female like women identified people, and we're all somewhere on the queer spectrum, so I don't know what was happening when we were like playing with Barbies when we were younger, but like we're all there. But every time, like I'm not out to my mom, but every time I come home she's like, did you hear about your cousin Gabby? Did you hear about Rafa's children? I'm like, no, tell me about it. And my like I already get like this little like feeling like, oh, what's this gonna be about? And she's like, they're gay. Can you imagine having 2 daughters that are gay like that? And I'm like, I can't imagine, Mom, because you have one 24-year-old who's bisexual and then another 20-year-old who's queer. So I don't know, Mom. You tell me. But yeah, and so it's like, it's not my story anymore. Like, it's not an individual story. It's my whole family. Like, it's not a part of just me anymore.
Any questions? On the mic, Bailey.
Okay, so the idea of like homonormativity as a conversation is blowing my mind right now, because I've never thought about it in like a defined way before. So I'm curious about how that intersects with gender roles in this idea we have, or like society has, of like within relationships anywhere on the queer spectrum, this idea of there being like a more masculine and a more feminine partner. So I'm wondering how that plays into the discussion of heteronormativity, homonormativity, and gender roles.
I can take that. I can start with that one.
I can tell you, like, from experience with, like, for example, like, my current relationship, like, I wear pants all the time, but she can, like, bench press me, so, like, it's, like, very interesting where those gender rules lie, like, and I think that, like, for all intents and purposes, like, she was like, if this was, like, a horrible rom-com, like, you would have the bad boy aesthetic, and I'd be, like, the good girl, and I was like, okay, well, like, technically speaking, I would be the bad being, and you would be the good being, and I don't believe in bad and good, but we can work with this definition right here. And, like, I think with gender roles, it gets really foggy, because I've had relationships where it's, like, really distinct, like, I'm the more masculine being, and, like, someone's the more feminine being, but I think, like, it gets really interesting when, like, for example, there's a bill to pay, and, like, someone's like, oh, well, like, it was my turn last time, and now it's your turn, and that's, like, not a gender thing, like, where the guy always pays, because it's, like, distinctly 2 females, it's, like, there's no precedent with that, so I think, like, in a way, it's either, like, freeing, where there's, like, no precedent, so I don't have to hold the door, and, like, she's has to walk through it, so like she has to figure out a way to get through. That's like not my job. And like opening a car door, for example, I open my car door because I have to leave through it, and I'm like, you got that, babe? So like, I think gender roles come into a really interesting, like, my mother has abandoned it, and it's just like, okay, like, we compromised. So I shaved the sides of my head, and she was like, oh dear, okay, fine, I'll compromise with you, like eyeliner in exchange for 2 sides of your head shaved. And like my mother and I bargained. I'm like, okay, can I wear just pants for this function? Okay, but you have to wear a necklace. Okay, fine. So like with gender, it's like a really interesting spectrum, and like I think I fall somewhere in like whatever I feel like identifying as this morning. So, like, I think it adds pressure in the sense that if you want to be like, this is 2 females, like, we're doing this we're going to be very feminine together, or like if you're like, we're two people and we'll like figure this out, like how we like to live our lives.
Yeah, for the guys, I think, so I'm like all for intersectionality, and I find it interesting when I see like, I think it's something very common with, or at least in my experience with like gay men, they want like a masculine gay male, and I'm like, why are you like, you're like perpetuating all these like systems of oppression, you know, like you're queer or you're gay, and like I hate that like you're trying to like, you know, go to like this homonormativity where you're like, okay, like gender has to be like quote unquote normal, you know, and I hate that, and it's just like, like, don't you see like how you're interconnected with like this whole struggle? And it's like, I don't know, I think it's very frustrating, but I think that's like in my experience, something that's been common with like gay men, they want like a masculine gay man as a partner.
Yeah, I like agree with you, but I feel like at the same time, like, I mean, for me personally, like, yes, like, I would prefer somebody masculine, like, not because, like, I look down on anybody feminine or because I find that, like, disrespectful or unattractive. I just think that, you know, like, my, like, ideal of, like, a man, like, is somebody who is a little more masculine. Like, that's just my own personal taste. I mean, I think it can generally, like, it can easily vary from person to person, and I don't think that, you know, not wanting feminine men doesn't mean that you don't respect them or that you don't identify with them. I just think that it means that you have your own taste and everyone's entitled to that.
Cool. Brett, you got a question?
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. So something that I know like I've struggled with, and I'm wondering if any of you have advice, or I'm sure you've all thought about this, but it's like I don't want to come out about my sexuality to people because like other people, like heterosexual people, have the privilege to not do that, and like why should I have to like present myself that way every time? That's exhausting. But at the same time, like I'm proud of it and I'm not like hiding it. So I think like Shyenne talked about it a bit when you said just like you exist that way, and if people ask you about it, you're gonna tell them. But like how do I like I'm trying to exhibit my pride more about it while also like not giving up on that fight about like I don't want to come out unless you like ask me.
Yeah, so that's something that I personally thought about myself. Again, coming from Texas. And so when I heard this like term, so like as opposed to like homonormativity, there's this thing called like heteronormativity. So it's like, and that is more so like, I think that's like the status quo right now where we live. So like, if you're heteronormative, you're seen as you're not performing like your sexuality, but in reality you are. You know, like I'm taking like a queer net class, and we're talking like, you know, the simple act of like having like a picture of your family on like your desk is like heteronormative. You know, like the fact that you I don't know, that you wear a ring. You know, like at one point it was like considered like heteronormative. So there's all these like ways where we perform our sexuality that like are taken for granted if you're part of like, if you're heterosexual, you know. And so like in that way it becomes something different, you know. Like for my sister, she posts a picture of like her and her husband, and she just captions it with like a heart. Like that is seen as like she's not performing like her sexuality. But if I did the same with a male, like then that would be like, oh, he's coming out. Like why are you putting it in my face, you know? Like why do you keep like on being like that proud? But I'm like, I'm just trying to live my life, you know. Like it's just like this like it's this taken for granted like sexuality, you know, that like we see heteronormative, like we see heterosexuals as like not performing their sexuality, and so we see it as like, oh, like they're not out and proud, but in reality they're like out and proud too, and they're performing it like every single day, you know. And so like the balance I said to myself is like, you know what, I'm just gonna do what makes me feel comfortable, you know. And like and it's oftentimes very comparable to like the like typical like heterosexual, you know, like my sister posting a picture of her boyfriend, you know, like with a heart, like that. I feel like I would have the confidence to do something like that. It'd be okay. But because there is this like common perception where like heterosexual is considered as like not performing like sexuality, then it's like difficult because everybody interprets you as like, oh, like you're making a statement, you're making a big deal about it. But it's like, no, like, you all are performing your sexuality too. You just take it for granted.
Do you want to, Stephen, before we close?
Okay. I think regarding that, I feel like I have different thoughts when where I am. Like which like location or like community where I am, like I have different thoughts regarding that, like Brett's concern or question. When I'm back home with my parents, I have every urge to tell them this part of my identity, because they are the people I love and I know they love me. I want them to know about it. But if I'm just out in the public, I wouldn't hold a sign and they're like walking the street saying like, hey, I'm gay, 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 gay. Like, know me, I'm gay. No, I'm going to be like, well, I introduce myself, I will be like, I'm Steven, I'm from China. That's what I would say. But when my thoughts differ, like, regarding this kind of thing, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming. If you ever want more information or thoughts or questions on these topics, the LGBTQ interns are always hanging about here in the center. If you want to know about LGBTQ groups on campus, there's Lambda Advocates. Again, you can come here, we're a wealth of knowledge. And thank you again to our speakers.
My thoughts differ, like, regarding this kind of thing, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming. If you ever want more information or thoughts or questions on these topics, the LGBTQ interns are always hanging about here in the center. If you want to know about LGBTQ groups on campus, there's Lambda Advocates. Again, you can come here, we're a wealth of knowledge. And thank you again to our speakers.